evening and welcome to Real Talk, where every Sunday night we offer insight, education, and resources to in-home caregivers and those that are affected in their world. These are the children, the parents, the extended family, and everyone who loves them. And our goal is to offer real life topics and learning through discussing real issues and offering real solutions. And tonight, I'm very excited to welcome our guest, Monique Dupree, otherwise known as Nanny Miss Monique. She is a social media influencer in the childcare industry, a career nanny, and an advocate for literacy, as well as diversity and inclusion in everyday children's fiction. And since I'm a reader, I love that. She reaches a large audience of parents and childcare professionals through her weekly story times and interviews with publishers, authors, and illustrators. She resides happily in Chicago with her husband and her daughter. So welcome, Monique. It's great to have you.
It's great being here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So tonight we're going to kind of dig into one aspect around your passion. We're going to discuss early literacy and a diverse, inclusive library. And I'm excited about this topic. I'm excited to learn myself and to also help our audience learn. But before we get into that, let's let our audience get to know you a little bit. So we share the professional stuff, but tell us a little bit about you, about your journey, how you got here.
Well, I was a nanny for over 22 years in Chicago and in Washington, D.C. I have always been a career nanny. I did dabble a little bit in preschool. I was a preschool teacher. But at the beginning of the pandemic, like a lot of nannies, I lost my position as a nanny. And fortunately, I was able to stay home with my family and it was the first time I was ever a stay-at-home mom. And I work for plenty of stay-at-home moms. So it was the first time I ever got to do it myself. And I said, what can I do to share my love for literacy with the world and still have that nanny profession, still work in childcare? So I started Nanny Miss Monique, the social media page. And I also have my Nanny Miss Monique website. And I diversify libraries for families. I make promotional videos and resumes for nanny entrepreneurs. And here I am today.
That is fantastic. I love hearing from people when they take something that can be a really difficult situation and turn it into something positive that doesn't just benefit them, but benefits so many people.
So many people, yes.
Yeah. And in an area where we need that, where there is such a gap. And so I love that you have not only stepped into that gap, but turned it into something so positive. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, this is exciting. But I really want to kind of dig into this. I want to talk about it. I want to be able to share with our audience and let them learn from you. How maybe they might benefit from or interact with you beyond even this tonight. So let's talk about literacy. Let's talk about reading. I'm a passionate reader and I read, well, I mean, there's books everywhere.
I see you have a lot of books.
I read all the time, every day. I read for work, I read for pleasure. There's a few things that are greater, but one of my greatest joys, even on vacation, is to park myself with a book. And I was passionate about this with my kids. So let's talk about reading to babies in utero, because a lot of people don't realize that is a thing.
Well, you want to start the bond with your child as soon as the baby is in utero. You really want to massage your belly, feel the baby move in your uterus, and you really need to start that bond because babies can hear as early as, what is it? Is it 5 weeks? Mm-hmm. I think babies can hear as early as 5 weeks in the womb. And that is so important because infants who can hear in utero have stronger language skills than babies who cannot hear. So you're starting that early literacy in the womb. You're starting that bonding in the womb. And you're developing language.
Mhm.
It's important to start developing language with your child. So when I nanny for families, and if they are pregnant, I would say, let's start picking out books for the baby. You can start reading to your child right now. And they're like, now? And I said, absolutely. It's so important that you read to your baby when they're in the womb. And I start curating the library right then and there. And it's very magical to feel the baby move, because they recognize the sound of the mother's voice. They recognize the sound of the heartbeat. So when they come out and they hear that voice, it's this bond that you have with the baby, and it's so important. I also think fathers should talk to the baby in the womb as well, and just just start those connections early on. And the more we talk, the more the baby learns. So that has been my experience with babies in the womb.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's one of the things that we teach in our class is the fact that Dr. T. Barry Brazelton, he's passed away now, but that's one of the things he does with clients is
Right.
when the baby is born, they encourage the parent to talk, and the baby actually responds to the parent's voice right after birth. So
Yes.
we know that they hear it. I love that you do that. And I love that you're encouraging both parents to talk to them, to read to them, because they do recognize both parents' voice.
They do. And when I was a nanny for a family, they had two children and the mother was pregnant. I would talk to the baby every day. Even though I'm like, hello, I'm introducing myself. I'm Nanny Miss Monique. I'm going to be your nanny. And I was there for delivery. I mean, I was really close with that family, and we really had some strong bonds of the children and the family and I. And I'm so fortunate to have that situation with them.
Absolutely. And those bonds with children are so important to their emotional well-being.
So
So
important.
for sure. So reading to children, how
Yep.
often should parents be reading to children once their children are born even?
All right. So once your child is born, you should be reading to your child 5 books a day. 5 books a day. If you read to your child 5 books a day, it's called the 1 million word gap. Have you heard of this before?
But I don't know the specifics about it. So I want to learn and I want our audience to learn.
Absolutely. So if you read to your child 5 books a day, your child will know 1 million words by the time they start kindergarten. That is so important. So think if you don't have the time and you wanted to read to your child just once a day. I mean, that is still great. So then I have the actual numbers here to share with everyone. So if you read to your child just once a day, your child will list to learn 63,570 words by the time they're 5 years old. So, because roughly a board book has about 180 words versus a picture book has around 280 words. So reading to your child every day, exposing them to vocabulary is just so important. And just like the human language, it's not like babies go to class to learn how to speak. They learn from us. They learn from us reading to them, and they pick up on the letters. If you want your child to read early, to learn early, to read early, you definitely should start, just read everyday children's fiction to your child. Also show great examples of reading by reading yourself. I think that's important. I worked for a family in Washington, D.C. Everybody was in a writer. So I worked for people who worked for the newspaper, worked for Vanity Fair. They had a library in their house. Every morning, the kids would come downstairs, I'd have the breakfast table ready, and they would rush to the library and read before the carpool person came to pick them up every morning. And the parents would all sit on the couch and snuggle with the children. And they would do this every single morning. They could not wait to cuddle with their parents in the library before school. And it's those bonds. It's those bonds. It's so important. So definitely reading to your child early and often. I mean, even if you just do it once a day, it's so important. Like, look at how many words. 63,000 words is a lot of words. So just increasing it a little bit and find out what your child's interests are. And it's as easy as that. I go to the library and I ask my daughter, well, you can kind of see what your child is into, especially if they're a toddler. Toddlers have interests. They like dinosaurs, they like trains, they like cars. Go to the library and just go to the vehicle section and pick out a bunch of board books and sit on the floor and have a book picnic with your child and just dive into those books and have fun with it. You can base sensory activities off of the books that you have, and you can create a whole lesson plan based on these books that you're getting for your children. So I just think it's really important. I wanted to say that if you read to your child early and often, just one book a day, and you will increase it. If you increase it just by 2 more books, you'll get 296,660 words. That's, I mean, just increasing a book, an extra couple of books a day. So I just think it's just important, and they test better. The testing, I mean, I know that shouldn't be so important, but it is important. I mean, this is the world that we live in, and they start testing children as early as 1st grade. I know they do it here in Chicago. So they will have to take those vocabulary tests. They're going to have to learn how to spell. And it may come naturally for a child who is read to every day.
Mhm. Yeah, so reading, as you said, their language gets better,
The language.
and that they read early. Did I hear that correct? They tend to read much earlier.
They will read much earlier. I always talk about my experiences because I've had so many great experiences. I work with a child who was 6 months old, and I went to the library every single day because it was an easy thing to do. I could say, oh, it'll take 45 minutes at the library, then it'll take 20 minutes to get home, and it would take a big part of the day out. So I like that. And we would just sit on the floor and read together all the time. By the time he was 2 years old, I opened up a book and he started sounding out the words. And I never sat there and said, oh, this is A, this is B, this is C. I mean, we would say our ABCs, and, we would do activities and things like that, but it started to just come naturally. The same thing happened with my daughter. My daughter started sounding out words at 18 months.
Wow.
And I think it's just from reading every single day, multiple books. So.
Wow, that's amazing. I know I have 2. So we started with our kids. So my husband, that was part of his bonding with the kids, is he would read to them every night. He did until they literally said, Dad, enough. Because mine are teenagers, almost out of high school now, my oldest one. And that has always been a huge thing. And both of my kids are fantastic readers. And so I love seeing that for sure. Is there anything else around reading and exposure to books that has a direct impact on babies?
Oh, absolutely. So everybody knows that babies' brains are they can absorb more. They can learn more. They can absorb language easier than an adult can. And what happens? Their brain kind of closes up as they get older. I believe it's age 12 when the brain, is that correct? I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I focus more on the 0 to 5, but we
Okay.
actually teach infant brain development. So I know a lot about the infant brain.
The infant brain, but yes, I believe it starts to close up and it's harder to absorb information. But the baby's brains are just so amazing, and they just learn quickly and fast. It's just very quick. It's very fast, and it's just our brains cannot absorb the way a baby's brain can, and they're just so many different things you have to understand. They're like learning the world around them. They're learning who their parents are. They're learning language. They're just learning about their environment. And it's very stimulating to them. And it's amazing how much they grow at this time. Yes.
So does reading that early, does that help them learn things like objects or numbers or colors? Does it impact any of those things?
It does impact learning colors and numbers. Those books are so important. So in the texture books, I love the open flap. You want to work on their fine motor skills. You want to work on the sensory. There's the bump books where they have all the different textures. And once again, you're sitting down with them and you're just talking to them and pointing out things. Eventually, your child will start to point out things and put two and two together. It's just really amazing. I remember the first words of a few of the children. It's from reading. You'll hear that. You'll stop. You should read a sentence. Read a book that you read all the time. It's all about repetition, right? You should be reading the same book all the time. I think when you're young, when they're babies, it's important to read the same book all the time because repetition is very important to an infant. So if you've read a book maybe a dozen times, stop in the middle of the sentence and see if the baby will finish.
Mhm.
See if the baby will finish your sentence. See if they will point to the object that you always point to. Because they start to remember these things, they start to pick up on it, and it's truly amazing. Even objects, like if there's a shape book and you see octagon, when you're outside, point to the stop sign with your child and say, that's the octagon in the book. Those are the squares that we see in the book. Look at the buildings. So I definitely think it's important to use books for just everyday, for your environment, everything that you do every day. Like, yes.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I have seen that with some of the children that I've worked with over the years, that they learn things and I think, wow, I didn't even realize they knew that. And I love that you mentioned repetition because that is actually integral to neural pathway development in infants is repetition. And I don't know any good nanny who cannot almost from heart without even saying, if I said, good night, moon,
Oh, yes.
who's going to then, good night, brush, good night. And they're going to go right into it. And
Yes, exactly. Good night to the old lady whispering hush. Absolutely. Everyone knows it.
Exactly. So let's talk about diversifying board books, making sure that if we're providing books for children, we're actually being really intentional about curating what do we need to include.
Okay. So babies start to see color as early as full spectrum of color as early as 5 months old. So what kind of books do we normally get for our children? That's very important for them to see color. We get those contrast books. We want high contrast books, lots of black and white books. And that's how we develop their color, the full range of color spectrum. So they have really strong sense of eyesight. So yes, that is very important. And babies start to create biases by 2 months old. How do we not create these biases? By reading books to our children, everyday children's fiction books that have people of color, people of diverse background, cultures, showing different languages. Like this is an old book that my daughter has. It's all chewed up right here. You can tell it's been used. But
Right?
it's a Wonder Woman book. And you would think, oh, how is this Wonder Woman book diverse and inclusive? Well, it is. It has a little girl in it that you see that they're all helping each other. And there's a little girl with a hijab right there. There's a little blonde girl. The girl who is playing Wonder Woman or pretending to be Wonder Woman, she could be a Latina girl. I mean, you want to read books where children start to normalize different cultures, so we're not creating these biases early on. So just making sure that it doesn't matter if you want books about yoga, research your books before you just don't pick up a book. You have to look at the book and you have to be mindful of who is in the book. And I think it's more important to look for books with actual people than have animals as the characters, because this is the world we live in. I want children to look at these people and just normalize the culture. Yes.
Absolutely. And I agree with that from a standpoint of culture for sure. Are there any other things that we should include in these books as we're looking for them? Are there things like, should we look at body size or anything else that could come
Yeah,
into play?
we should look at everything. We should look at hair textures. We should look at language. And another issue, this is a book called One Black Cat, and it is written in English and in Urdu, which I believe, I think language should be more inclusive too, because children have biases about language when they see it. A lot of people are like, oh, why is it written in Spanish? Why is it written in French? You don't want your kid to say that. You just want your kid to say, wow, look, that's French, that's Spanish. Be inclusive with language, being inclusive with body size, being inclusive with handicaps as well. That's very important. I've noticed lately, there's a lot of books with children in wheelchairs, children who have dyslexia, children who are blind, the hearing impaired. And I've done a few story times where I've had an interpreter sign while I've been reading, because that's important too. You want to be inclusive to all. So teaching your child very early on when they're infants, as soon as they can see color, you want to introduce your inclusive books.
Oh, I mean, honestly, this sounds horrible. That's not even something that really crossed my mind as something that was important that early. I understand the concept, and I think most of us do for something. Sorry, we have to forgive that late afternoon, early evening sun on my face.
Oh, no.
But most of us think about that when kids are a little bit older.
Right.
A lot of times we aren't thinking about it as infants. So that is huge to
It is.
think about, and the impact that has on setting the stage. I'm huge on set everybody up for success, and that's setting these children up for success in that arena right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go. I have some statistics. As early as 6 months, a baby's brain can notice race-based differences as early as 6 months old, you guys, okay? By the age 2 to 4, children can internalize racial biases, okay? By the age 12, many children are already set in their beliefs. So they've had a decade of parents rearing them, setting them up, and by that time, you can unlearn behaviors, but by 12 years old, it's very, very hard. Think of the children who were born in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And I'm not talking about just Black children, I'm talking about all children. So white children who have books that reflect that they can see themselves in these stories. What's happening when they go out into the world and they see that the world doesn't look like their children's book? It creates these whys, like why is that person brown? Why is that person in handy? It creates a lot of whys and questions. So having fiction stories in your house that just are fun books. I always say to myself, like, buy everyday children's fiction, because no child, well, not, there may be some child, but a child's not saying, oh, I want a book on Abraham Lincoln. You know what I mean? Like, so those books are important, but a lot of people say, I'm going to buy diverse, inclusive books. I'm going to buy Rosa Parks. I'm going to buy Martin Luther King. I'm going to buy Harriet Tubman. Those books are important in our American history, but those books are considered, to me, struggle stories. And we want books that just have kids in them, just being kids. Here's a book that I absolutely love. It's called The Boys by Lauren Ace. And it's a group of friends who grow up together. This little Asian boy, a Black boy, a white boy, and an Indian boy. And they're all great friends. And it shows how they grew up from when they were toddlers all the way to adulthood. And having a book like that, could you imagine what it would have been like if people had books like this early on? I think it sets them up, like what you said, it sets them up for the right path. It really does. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot less painful to learn things the right way than it is to unlearn them later in life.
Exactly.
So already we've talked about a ton of stuff and we're almost out of time. But if you could share one final takeaway with our audience, what would you leave them with?
I would leave them with, your bookshelf should reflect the world around you.
Oh, I love that.
Your bookshelf should reflect the world around you.
Fantastic. And I know we talked in the beginning, you're actually going to provide us a list of recommended books. So we're going to put that in the feed. I love that, including the books that you were showing us tonight, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And if anyone is interested, you can go to nannymissmonique.com, click on diversify your library, and I can help you diversify your library by your child's interest. So whatever your child's interest is, I can pick out books based on their interest and make sure that those books are diverse.
That is fantastic. I love that. And we will make sure that that contact information is in the feed as well, so that if you are watching this and you want to reach out to Monique, you can do that. So I just have to say thank you, not even on behalf of our audience, but just for myself. To get to learn about this is really fantastic. It has been an honor to have you, and I am really appreciative of all the takeaways that you've shared with us.
Oh, thank you. I have had a really great time chatting with you as well. And I do have one more thing. I have something for everyone who watches today. So if you watch this episode today and you would like a 15 second, 30 second, or 59-second promotional video, or any services from me, you can get free 100 business cards for free with a QR code on the back, wherever you like that QR code to go, or you can get them or you can get magnets. So magnets or business cards if you order a promotional video from me. And I know for the NCSs, a magnet would be amazing, because the parents just put that magnet right on the refrigerator and they have your information.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I appreciate that. We'll make sure that that all gets in the feed so everybody can find that. And really, I really appreciate this. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. I love this so much.
Absolutely. If you have any questions around this topic or anything related to early literacy and a diverse, inclusive library, put them in the feed and tag Nanny Miss Monique or tag Newborn Care Solutions. We'll make sure that you get answers. And if you're wanting to rewatch this segment or catch any of our other educational content, go over to our website, click on the education tab at newborncaresolutions.com. And you can also find all of our Real Talks on our YouTube channel. Just use the search function and put in Real Talk Newborn Care Solutions and they all come up. Thank you for joining us and have a great night. Good night.
Good night.